sad, empathetic attempt to become YouTube famous. Decided to LS swap this 2009 BMW 128, document just about all of the process, which I'm going to share with you guys over probably the course of probably 2 or 3 videos to try and cover it all. Just kind of giving everybody or anybody that's somewhat interested an idea of what's involved in swapping this kind of car or chassis, an E90 chassis or an E8x chassis. Although this swap is extremely well documented, nothing I'm doing here is groundbreaking whatsoever. So a lot of it was just compiled information and ordering parts over the course of 2 months, stockpiling them, and then completing the entire build. So from start to finish, it took about 3 months working on it once or twice a week. So like I said, here we go. We're going to get right into it today. Keep it nice and sweet and short. I'll give you guys build list and details on all the parts that I ended up using for this project. We're just up on the finishing ledge here, but we're going to start from the real beginning, taking the N51 out and everything that it took to get to this point. We are getting the N51 yanked out of this thing to start on the project here. You can see there I've got the whole front clip off. Condenser assembly all kind of come out as one. This whole front clip assembly comes out as one piece. It's really nice. So next step is going to be going underneath, dropping the exhaust, Driveshaft, all the connections, and then we'll be able to start getting this motor yanked out of here. As far as connections go here at the DME box, pretty simple. Everything that's coming out of this side, basically the body side of the car, has to get disconnected. So all this stuff is going to be staying with the car. Everything else is going to kind of stay bundled in this inner DME box, and it's going to get flopped up over on top of the engine to get removed. The only one that you have to make sure you remove, or you're going to have to, it won't even let you, is that one gray connector right here that Mike always talks about. Has the majority of the connections that we're going to need to make with the Holley system. It just gets pulled out of this DME connector here, this smaller DME connector. You basically just pull this locking tab all the way out. You can just grip it and rip it, and it'll come right out. And then one lock tab, and that gray connector will slide out. And then everything else here is basically just going to get thrown up on top of the engine like such and removed. The only other connections are this ground wire and the power wires for the alternator and sub harness here that get connected here, and the ground point down low. But that's pretty much it. So at this point, we're ready to start ripping this engine out of here. For the interior, so far all I've done is pull the center console out and removed a couple of bolts, Torx bolts for the gear shift assembly. You can see it's got a perfect hole right there. The T56 should line up with Mike's mounts and transmission mount. We're going to be doing a T56, just the stock F-body T56 in this car. So once we get the shift linkage disconnected from the trans, we'll be able to pull that whole thing out of there. And also started building up our LS1 that we've got for this build here. This one was like a fully forged LS1 that I had laying around. It's actually put together like over 15 years ago, and it's just been sitting since. I don't have any paperwork on it or anything, so kind of going on hopes and dreams with this one, but we're going to put it together and see what happens. It's got like a forged crank, rods, pistons. It was converted to a 58 reluctor wheel, so we're going to do all Gen 4 stuff on it. I put a stage 2 cam in it from BTR, just an NA cam with a 4X cam gear, valve train upgrade. We just did dual springs and rocker arm trunnion upgrades. We've got E90X mounts on here, as well as CX Racing headers, standard F-body water pump, and harmonic balancer, and NBS truck starter because it's a little bit shorter. Basically, this is everything that is laid out on Mike's website pretty nice. So one thing I wanted to mention at this point is when you have everything out, this black insulation on the firewall, specifically on the driver's side, should be removed. It's apparently a pretty big fire hazard. I actually didn't remove it, and it's been fine so far, but if I ever take the motor back out, it's going to get removed.
and metal heat shielding installed in that location because the driver's side header does run right down that area. Like I said, it's been okay so far, but if you have the engine out, it's much easier to do it now. Just remove everything that's in that firewall to trans-tunnel black insulation. And
motor and transmission are in the car. Really was a lot easier than the N51 coming out. Actually, we've got the motor mounts lined up perfectly, the transmission cross member lined up perfectly. We are almost all the way forward on the mounts. The only place where it was really tight were the bell housing bolts down in back here. The one bell housing bolt was extremely close or sitting on the firewall or the trans tunnel there, so I did slide it forward until everything cleared, and everything seems to be in good shape now. Doesn't really bother me. I wanted it to be as far back as possible for weight distribution, but honestly, this isn't no crazy race car build, so this will be just fine. Plenty of clearance on the CX Racing headers with the steering shaft. I've got the steering shaft bolted back up. Everything clears nice and well all the way around there. So a couple of the things we're going to have to route. We'll just get rid of this evap line a little bit further back in the car. We'll probably either just put a little tiny filter on the end of it or just leave it open towards the back of the car. You just can't cap it off, otherwise you'll have problems fueling your car and the car won't take gas very well. We're still going to have to modify this N51 hard metal fuel line to the vehicle. N52s uses quick connect right here. Super simple. You can just disconnect the quick connect a little bit further down and put in an adapter with a piece of AN line just up to the manifold. But this is a hard piece of metal fuel line all the way back to the fuel tank. So we're going to cut it a little bit further down and do a compression fitting to 6AN adapter. Putting the front accessory drive bracket on here, valve covers, intake manifold, all the basic LS accessory stuff that you got to get on here. I'll be back. Just wrapped up the installation of the accessory mounts here. I have F-body spacing, so this is just the standard F-body water pump and tensioner, crank pulley, and then his F-body accessory kit. This is a Mechman, I think 220 or 240 amp alternator. I decided to go kind of expensive on the alternator just because I know for a fact that these cars are very voltage sensitive and amperage sensitive, so I wanted to get a nice alternator for it. Apparently any of the truck alternators will work, but this one was nice and black too, so whatever. Spent the money once, won't really have to worry about it, hopefully. Got the power steering pump bolted up in its bracket, both idler pulleys and the Saturn or Satan AC compressor, the universal AC compressor. Definitely keep an AC on this build. Everything went together pretty nice. You got to kind of follow his documentation that's on the LS-E90 website that shows you which spacers to use, as well as his YouTube video for putting together the accessory drive. Really helpful. So it's got 2-inch spacers with an additional spacer on the back for the F-body spacing. Did have to do a little bit of bending on the power steering lines. This one that comes up from underneath and has this 90-degree turn in it. You kind of got to open that 90 up so that the power steering line can go down around the AC compressor down there, but that wasn't too much work. A little bit of pry bar action in it, straightened right out. Everything else seems to fit pretty well. The one power steering line back here I had to bend slightly as well to get around the AC compressor, and then we have the bracket on the back of the AC compressor as well. Everything fit together pretty nice. So here we're going to be starting to put just the basic accessories on here: valve covers, intake manifold, throttle body, all that fun stuff. Probably just going to time lapse through it because this is all pretty basic stuff that probably already have done before. If not, there's a million other YouTube videos out there. So here we go. So we got the intake on, the valve covers on, set of Deka Siemens 60-pound injectors. It's just going to stay an NA build probably its whole life, so I'll probably never need more injector than that. Just got a quick adapter on here. I'm going to run a fuel pressure sensor right off the rail right there. The Billet 3-bolt to 4-bolt throttle body adapter plate with an LS3 gold blade throttle body, 6-pin connector. It's going to match up perfectly with the drive-by-wire harness from Holley. It looks like you could flip it either way. It doesn't look like it would matter too much. It was really, really close to the tensioner pulley here. It'll probably look a little bit cleaner with the connector over here anyway, because I can run it right down the side with the rest of the Holley harness, so I'll just run it this way for now. Get the coil packs on here, and then I'm going to probably go underneath of the car and start working on drive shaft, fuel system, a little bit of exhaust work too. Fuel system time. This is an N51 car, and the N51 cars have a different fuel system. It's a Sulev car. What they did on the car was basically make the entire fuel system have way less connections, and they were screw type connections. So you can see this is the metal fuel line from the fuel tank. On an N52 car, which is what I would recommend starting out on, this line turns into a quick connect right in about this area right here. It's super easy to adapt that quick connect to the BM or the LS fuel rail. On an N51 car like here, it actually just has this metal fuel line. This is where I cut it, and it goes all the way up and bolts or screws into the fuel rail of the car. So you basically have to either do a complete new fuel system or do something like this. This is a compression fitting. I basically just took a brake line cutter and cut this fuel line and then used a compression fitting. It's a 5/16 compression fitting to a 6AN adapter. It's made by Evil Energy or something like that. I think it's on Amazon. I got all this fuel system stuff on Amazon this time. Usually I use like Fragola fittings and all that stuff, but for like a quick and dirty put together, we're going to try out this Evil Energy stuff. So like I said, 5/16 compression fitting to a 6AN adapter. This is a 6AN hose straight end that I made this line up, and then it kind of goes up towards underneath of the brake lines, real tight against the frame rail, as tight as I can make it, so it's as far away from the exhaust as possible. It continues up around the coolant hoses for the heater core here, again just away from the exhaust as far as possible. Then 6AN adapter or fitting on this end to the pretty standard typical, I think it's 3/8. It's either 3/8 or 5/16 quick adapter for the fuel rail, with that line coming from the fuel rail or the fuel line down below. This is a super quick and dirty fuel system. I'm hoping that it'll work just fine. This isn't, like I said, it's going to be making maybe 360 horsepower, so the stock pump hopefully will be able to keep up. The N51 fuel tanks do have quite a few problems. They're not serviceable. If the suction jet portion fails, you can't fix it. You got to replace the tank because you can't open it up. There's also a piece of rubber fuel line on the passenger side of the fuel tank that'll split open. It's like a little, like a delivery hose that goes from like a pickup to the fuel pump, and it's just like a 3-inch rubber section of hose that'll split open and cause like all kinds of weird issues with fuel pressure. It might idle fine, and then as soon as you stomp on the gas, it'll start leaning out because it doesn't have the correct amount of fuel flow, but pressure will kind of stay steady. It's kind of messed up. So if you're having issues with the stock pump not keeping up on like a low horsepower build and you have an N51 car, definitely pop the hat off on the passenger side of the tank and just check that fuel hose. You kind of have to like look down into it, and you'll see like a little 3-inch piece of rubber hose. I'm going to check it on this car before I end up firing it up just to make sure that it's okay. And eventually down the line, who knows, I might end up just swapping in a normal fuel tank from an N52 car or a 135 into this car. Probably just solve a lot of issues with all that stuff. So for now, I'm just going to try and run the stock fuel pump. I will be bypassing the EKPS module with just a relay. I'm going to run it off of the green power wire from the Holley Terminator X. I'll be going over that as well. But for the plumbing of the fuel system, that's it. Underneath of the car here so far, as you can see, we've got everything bolted up as far as transmission goes. Clutch line that I'm going to have to run to the clutch pedal, which I'm going to be adding to the car. Remote bleeder line. It's pretty tight up in there. It would be pretty hard to get a hold of that regular bleeder, so I'm kind of glad I got that and put that in before putting this whole thing in. Just installed the drive shaft. I did get this drive shaft from Precision Shaft Technologies, PST drive shaft. Probably could have gotten one cheaper from like a local drive shaft joint, but I've used their drive shafts before. I don't have any problems, so I called them up. If you've ever talked with any drive shaft shop, you know that it's usually grumpy old men that feel like they'd rather be doing anything other than talking to you on the phone right now, but they were pretty decent. Only asked me really one question, one measurement from the tail shaft housing to the flange here that I bought from Mike. So mine was like 48 1/8 inches. So I called him on a Monday, had the drive shaft Friday, so seems to fit perfectly. It's got 1350 joints. Pretty standard drive shaft, 3-inch. Looks like a 3.5 probably would fit. It's gonna get real tight around that e-brake cable there. Probably does fit just fine, but opted for a 3-inch drive shaft because it's not gonna be a high horsepower build. So hopefully this 328 diff and axles or 128 diff and axles hold up. If not, I'll either be putting like a 135 setup in there, or I don't really want to do an 8.8, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how much abuse it can take before it lets go. It does have 200,000 miles on it, so we'll see. A little bit of Loctite on these bolts here. Don't bother buying that companion flange. The drive shaft shop said that they needed to use their own because they need to put it on there for balancing the drive shaft anyway. So I bought one prior because I thought I was going to have to either just get a drive shaft that just had a U-joint and press it together and use it, or I don't really know what I was thinking, but I'm going to have to return it just because they supplied it with the drive shaft. So all in all said, the drive shaft ended up being like $550. Something, kind of a more expensive part of the build, but it is what it is, and looks like it's a pretty nice piece. Got a lot of engagement here, but it's fine. It doesn't really move any because it's an independent rear suspension, so shouldn't be seeing too much in and out movement on the transmission side. Got the rest of the CX Racing header downpipes on as well. They fit pretty good, pretty close to the floorboards, which is nice. I mean, pretty good kit for the price, honestly. Probably put the wideband in on this side just because the connector for it lays down nicely right here. So I'll zip tie it up to the trans there and run the wideband into the passenger side bank. This is what I came up with as far as a Y-pipe setup. I don't make exhaust very often, but this is like a custom Y-pipe that I fabbed up, and it dumps into a stock 135i Burke muffler that I picked up off of Facebook Marketplace. So the Y-pipe piece was pre-made, and I kind of just made the rest with the V-bands. Let's Harbor Freight this China pipe together. Half the time I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. E-bands are definitely warped as shit. This is what happens when you TIG weld once every 2 or 3 years, I guess. It'll work.
The TIG welding started to get away from me on the pie cut section there right before the Y pipe. I didn't tack weld it in enough spots. It was starting to blow through and open up on the other side, so I had to switch out and just kind of blow it in there with the MIG gun. But overall came out half decent. It's just an exhaust system, doesn't need to be crazy, but it'll work.
This was AC lines. We've got them pretty much situated, I think, where they're going to stay. Use the LS7 adapter here at the expansion valve at the firewall. Then the low side line with the low side port connecting to it, kind of running down to the lower port on the AC compressor down here. I know it's a little messy down here. It's hard to kind of tell what's going on. So the lower port on the AC compressor right there is that low side line with the port going to the expansion valve. It kind of comes out of the AC compressor and goes straight back. So like there's like a 90 in it, it goes straight back. And that's pretty much the only way it'll clear the frame rail here. If you try to like pull it straight up and down, it kind of hits the frame rail and it won't go in. So you kind of got to loop it down, make that 90. It'll put a little tiny bit of a bend in it, like an S-shaped bend right here. But it does fit in there pretty nice. It's real tight on the coil pack, but not really too big a deal. I did swap the 2 bolts here because this little stud thing was hitting the crimp right there on the AC line, but no big deal. The other AC line was able to sneak it right through the power steering line there. It's kind of the best way. It sat in the car, hooked up to the top port on the AC compressor. Make sure you got your O-rings in there. This one's going to get tied down and around, come up to the AC condenser right next to this other line with the high side port. Power steering lines, I got the reservoir mounted back up. This one's pretty tight in here too. Real close to number 1 coil, but it's fine. It's just a power steering line. I do have them zip tied together to try to keep them away from the cylinder 1 header, but they line back up in there. Little holder on the frame rail right over here, pretty nice. So both of these lines I'll be able to hook back up to the power steering cooler once we get the front end of the car back on. The only other thing I got to take care of over here are these heater core lines. I'm going to be running those obviously to the heater core ports on the water pump. I'm going to figure out what kind of adapters I'm going to use. Probably just going to cut these quick connects off and hose barb them together. So I'll get that figured out and I'll be back. Just finished up taking care of the coolant lines on the vehicle. Wanted to give you a quick overview of how I ran them. I kind of stole this idea off of somebody off of the Facebook page. They posted a picture of how they did it just like this and it looked awesome. So took a picture of it and basically just copied it. Works out really well though. So we've got the 5/8 and 3/4 inch heater hose lines here. This is like a pre-molded U with a little S bend in it. Kind of goes right around that lower expansion tank hose really well. This is a pre-molded 90 for the 3/4 inch heater hose. So it kind of goes right into a T, just a plastic Dorman T. I'll put part numbers for all of the T's and everything that I used on the car. This is the factory lower expansion tank hose. Kept the quick connect, cut the other end off, and spliced it into that T for the 3/4 inch hose. That's going to fill the expansion tank, keep the cooling system happy. The other line here ran to an S to a 90, and both of these lines ran down across the front of the motor. I kind of just have them temporarily strapped up. I'm probably going to come up with something better to hold them there. They come over to the heater hose lines that come out of the firewall. Both of these ones coming out of the firewall are like 3/4 or maybe even a little bit bigger than that actually. So what I just did was cut the quick connects off and used a 3/4 to 5/8 reducer barb, brass barb, crimped them on, And then for the other 3/4 inch hose, just the 3/4 inch to 3/4 inch barb. Again, with a couple of clamps on there to keep it secure. I'm probably going to try to come up with some kind of clamp to hold it to the frame rail over here too. It is using its factory little holder right there. It doesn't hold it very well though, so I'm going to come up with something else better to hold it to the frame rail. The AC line kind of runs along the same path. You can see here it comes in between the power steering line and follows those heater hose lines, and it'll plug into the condenser when we get that back on the vehicle. If you don't have one of these kits already, this is just one I picked up on Amazon real quick, but these are awesome. These stepless hose clamps, I guess they call them. I don't know what to call them. One time use, basically you got to cut them off if you ever got to take them off, but it comes with the pair of pliers to crimp them on. It's kind of stupid, like you can't really find one of these in a standard size. They're all pretty much metric, so they're all millimeters. Which just is like, they're just off on size. Like they're either just a little too big or a little too small usually for working on like American stuff like this. But if you go one size down, like the tighter size, you get plenty of crimp out of them, and none of these should have any issues leaking. I think it just looks a little bit cleaner than hose clamps too. It does kind of suck if you got to take it apart, but usually I have hose clamps laying around if you got to take it apart and put it back together real quick without one of those. But plenty of room over here. I mean, there's tons of room over here. I guess if you were going to use a factory F-body AC compressor, but I'm not doing that. But this just seems like a nice cleaner way to route these hoses. I'll probably strap them together like this too, so that they're nice and tight like that. But that's pretty much the whole cooling system, minus making the upper and lower radiator hoses, which I'll do once I get the radiator back in the car. But this is a pretty decent setup. So got the power steering reservoir mounted back up. It's pretty tight over here with the AC lines, power steering lines, cooler lines, AC lines, but it all fits. So getting ready to throw the front radiator assembly back on here. I have to replace the radiator because yeah, as soon as I looked at that the wrong way, it snapped off. So new radiator, CFS radiator. Let me see if it's got a part number on this box or not. I'm going to link all the part numbers, pretty much everything I tried to use in all of my videos, so that at least you know kind of an idea. 31 or 3718 radiator. This is like all the N51 SULEV cars have a sensor on the radiator, a catalyst sensor. It's pretty dumb. Super expensive replacement radiator from BMW. This is just like a $180 radiator that doesn't come with that sensor. You're supposed to swap it over. Not going to be doing that. This one's actually really nice. It already comes with this one hose clamped off, so that saves you one step. This is the outlet from the other radiator. I had to swap it over, and I put a cap on it, a rubber cap on it. You just had to cut the band clamp and pull the hose off and clamp it off. I used some of these just heater hose caps off of Amazon, crimped one of them non-reusable clamps on there, screwed it in. Gonna get it set up, replace the radiator, and then we're gonna set it back on the car. Working on the cooling system today. We got the upper and lower radiator hoses attached. So I'll give you a rundown. I installed that new radiator. Got it just sitting on the mounts right here. Upper radiator hose. Obviously this one was snapped off. So I bought a new upper radiator hose, just an OEM hose for a 128. Cut the clamp off of it, pulled the hose off. This is the stock connection that used to go to the heater core lines. Cut the clamp off of that and just capped it with another one of those heater core hose clamps. This is going to be our steam port fitting. This is a stock, I think, upper radiator hose for a F-body, like Camaro Trans Am. It's a Gate part number 22352. It worked pretty good. I had to cut it a little short right here. It's not like perfect fitting, but it does seem to fit pretty well. And it is going to clear our 4-inch intake boot there. So it's going to have a little bit of upward angle, but it's going to work pretty good. As far as lower radiator hose, this is actually another, I think, F-body hose that I had laying around. It looked pretty similar to this one, where it was just kind of like an S-bend. And I kind of just chopped it in half and did the same thing down here. This is the straight that used to connect to the upper radiator, or the thermostat inlet or cylinder head inlet of the N51, N52. So it's just a straight connector with the hose cut off of it. With that other hose, I just had to chop like a like 1.5 feet off of it. So I don't really have a part number on this one. I'm not sure. I don't think it's the same as this 22352. So sorry, you're kind of on your own for a lower radiator hose. I was able to make this one work with stuff I had laying around from other projects, but might want to do a little bit more research on see what other people have done. I know a couple other people have used like stock lower hoses flipped around or some other kind of crazy contraption, but I think I'm going to rock this. It seems to work pretty well. We also have our AC lines bolted up. It's really tight down there against the radiator hose, but it's still got plenty of clearance. That's pretty much going to take care of the cooling system. I'm going to run this that expansion tank line that kind of wraps around here and clips in here, plugs into this. I'm going to run a T in it, and it's going to T into the stock steam port for the LS motors. And that'll take care of the steam port setting. I also hooked up the brake booster line. This is the stock brake booster hose from an LS1 intake to the stock BMW quick connect fitting here. I just chopped off the hose that was on this and slid that hose right on. It was a perfect fit. I just got to hook up power steering lines, and then I can probably throw the front clip back on it, or at least leave it like this until I get it fired up and make sure everything works still. Next, we're going to be tackling probably some wiring. So the Holley Terminator X definitely is a nice unit. This is the third one I've set up. If you cross your I's and dot your T's, usually won't have a problem with them. I know a lot of people get into trouble with them if they're not following the directions and don't know what they're doing, but today I'm going to try to go over the wiring with you guys. I'm going to try to keep it as entertaining as possible. I know this isn't very entertaining stuff, but I'm going to try to keep it clipped and fast-paced, and try to go over the important items that are needed and try and block out the rest. This is a green power wire that I ran through the harness for the starter. It's easier if you just do it now before you put the harness in. That way you don't have to worry about running a power wire to the starter after the harness is already done. The next thing we're going to go over is here in the E-box. This is the automatic transmission connector. This has two pairs of twisted wires, red and blue. Both of these wires are going to have to be crimped together in order for the system to work right. If you just leave this connector unplugged, the wiper's going to go crazy. The CAN system's not going to be communicating. It's not going to be happy. So you got to cut and crimp red to red, blue with red, but blue to red. Stripped and crimped right here. Ended up using some non-insulated butt connectors. I like these better than soldering. Right here, I'll leave the link in the description with some heat shrink end caps here. These ones are the type that have like the glue inside of them. Helps keep moisture out. But see, blue with red, blue to red, red to red. That should be taken care of for the CAN bus system. This thicker black wire on the white connector is going to be the starter wire, so we're going to cut that. That's going to get attached to that green wire that is running down to our starter. That's one's actually going to come out of the car and send the signal to the starter to start the thing up. We have our 6 drive-by wires broken out. The 2 yellows, the 2 browns, and the 2 whites. The browns get tied together, the yellows get tied together, and these are going to be our pedal signals. We also have this black and blue wire broken out of the connector for the fan, the 2 PT CAN wires from Mike's box, this blue and red wire for a brake signal. It's going to end up going to pin 41, I think, on the CAS module. We're going to get these pinned out using a Deutsch connector, just like Mike's video. Like, just watch his video. It's going to be way better than this one. This is just kind of a follow along of his video, but it is nice and clean, so it's definitely the way I'm going to do it. So we're going to get these wired up to, like I said, this 12-pin Deutsch connector. We've got our wires that we need from the car side of the harness wired into this connector. Drive-by wire, CAN, starter wire, fan control wire that's going to get hooked up to the output harness on the Holley Terminator. All these other wires I'm just going to kind of tuck in here for right now until I get everything running and situated, and then I'll figure out what else I can cut out of here to make some more room in this box. Continuing on with the wiring, we've got the harness made up here for the body side harness to the Holley Terminator harness. Black to green, that's going down to my starter. Red to red and blue to blue for the CAN wires that go into Mike's CAN box. We've got yellow on the drive-by wire harness, which would be the pedal side, yellow to white. Then we've got orange to yellow, black to brown, and blue to the white with yellow stripe in the car side. An output wire hooked up, this gray-yellow output wire. You can choose any of the gray ones. They're all 4 of them are outputs. You just gotta remember which one you have it on. And that's gonna be for our black and blue for the fan control. So we're gonna set up an output in the Holley Terminator control software to turn on the fan when we wanted to. And that's gonna just feed this black-blue wire with a pulse width modulated signal to turn the fan on and off. One piece of advice for the wiring is you can't always rely on the BMW wiring diagrams. A lot of the times this stuff's wrong. I was just kind of looking for that wire that you have to splice into the brake signal wire. So it's that one that we cut out of the gray connector. I was trying to find out which one to match that up to. This one, this blue with a red wire, has to get sent to pin 41 on the CAS. According to the wiring diagram from ISTA, which I use every day at work, this blue with black is supposed to be in pin 1. It's definitely not pin 1. That's pin 1 right there. The other side of the connector clearly has that black-blue wire at pin 5. So I wanted to make sure that this was the correct wire. So I did a continuity check. Basically just put your meter on ohms, stick it in slot 5 here for that blue with black wire, take it over to the CAS module and check for continuity between it and the CAS module that sits right up in here. A little dark, I don't have my flashlight, but there's this black connector that goes to the CAS module right here, pin 41. I took this outer sleeve off with just these 2 retainer clips right here, and it slides right off. Pin 41 on the CAS does ohm out with that other wire from the blue-black under the hood on that pin 5. So the wiring diagram was wrong, but it is the right wire. So I'm going to be splicing those 2 together. So there we go. We've got the brake signal wire, the blue with the red, spliced up with the blue and black wire that goes to the CAS module. That's going to tell our, or at least give 12 volts to the CAS module whenever we press the brake pedal. Insinuating that the car is in drive or in park and ready to start. So that should be the last of the wiring here as far as the stock side of the wiring. Got the first power cable done. Got it hooked up to the larger 13mm stud. This is hot at all times. This one's lightly fused, I think, 20 or 30 amps from that battery distribution fuse block that sits on top of the battery in the back of the car. But this main stud is what we're going to use for the alternator and starter. So this is some 1 gauge cable with some terminal ends that I crimped on using a hydraulic crimper from Amazon. Thing works great with some terminals. We covered it in wire loom and then heat shrunk the ends of it. It gives it a nice kind of professional look. But I'm going to run it through here. This is where the stock power cable would run from the alternator on the N51. So I kind of like the way that looks. Whatever. It actually ends up in its own holder over here too. It'll clip in real nice right there. And this is going to be our power cable from the start point to the starter. Got it wrapped up in some heat wrap. It's going to be real close to the headers down at this point. But it'll fit just fine. Just kind of using whatever fittings I had around. I'm kind of running low, so I had to use a 1/2-inch stud one here, but it'll work just fine. Gonna get sit on there, and then it's gonna go kind of around the motor mount onto the stud on the starter, like such. The header and the power cable there, along with the heat wrap, I think will be okay. Don't forget about your ground strap. I used one of the front bolts here on the front of the block and ran it down around the motor mount to factory ground point location right here. That should be good enough ground for the entire engine. I might add another one on this side, somewhere over here, one of those maybe front mounting points there, to maybe somewhere on the frame over here, or maybe that ground lug, the factory ground lug on the passenger side. Things real temporary right now, just everything's plugged in. I just finished up doing the wizard on the Terminator X on the handheld there. I have the switch power just right to real power right now, or constant power, just so I could get it running, and then I'll run everything into the car and make everything nice and pretty once I know this engine runs. TPS auto set was successful first time, awesome. So this is going to be the legit first startup. Let's see what happens. this like fucking hacked together wiring just so I could get it to run. But it fucking runs. Fired up half a crank. Man, I really wasn't expecting that. I knew it would probably start, but didn't know if I was gonna have some kind of weird rod knock or some kind of weird noise, a lifter noise or whatever. It's got some cheap lifters in it. In this motor, the bottom end at least has been sitting around for like literally 15 years wrapped up in cellophane. So I'm just glad that it runs. It sounded good. So we're gonna get this wiring cleaned up under the hood. I am gonna drop the junction box in the front to get to the DME box fan to be able to run some wires down through the car, inside of the car for two-step activation, switch 12-volt key power wire, my fuel pump wire that we're gonna be running back to a relay. So I'll give you a look at that. Box out here to get access to the back of this fuse box and that E-box fan that lives right back there. A note on this power wire that I was going to use for the switched power for the Terminator. This is the wiring diagram. So the junction box goes right to, one leg goes to the front cigarette lighter, the other leg breaks off and goes to the other two, which is fuse 8 right here. This is 20 amp mini fuse. I was going to put a fuse tap in there. It's not deep enough to fit all the way in there because the box is pretty recessed. The fuses are pretty recessed in there, so this doesn't even contact the blades back there. So I'm just going to tie into the back of the fuse box here. It'll be protected by that 20 amp mini fuse. This green with white stripe, there's 2 of them that go into the back of this blue connector. That's what's coming out of that 20 amp mini fuse. You can use either one of these. One leg is going out to the rear, or I'm sorry, the front cigarette lighter, and then the other leg is splitting off and going to the other two. Tapping into either one of these green with yellow stripe wires will be that good 12-volt key on ignition wire that we'll use for the Terminator X. So I'll just cut this like here and splice it in. Since my fuse tap didn't work, it wouldn't go deep enough into the box, I ended up wiring in the switch 12-volt and another switch 12-volt for the trans harness right into the back of this. So we got the DME E-box fan out. All I did was kind of peel the carpet back down in here. This bracket bolts down to like basically the firewall, like straight back, kind of underneath the carpet right there. Just a single 10mm, and then you can kind of pull this bracket back enough to be able to get your hands on that E-box fan. That little E-box fan sits plugged in, like clipped into that housing right there, and then this plugs into a wire that comes out of that thick harness down here. It's like a fat white connector. You'll see it once you start playing with it, that white connector right there. So you just unplug it and kind of like rock it back and forth and just kind of yank it off. It'll come right off, and then you have a nice hole here that's kind of like nice and plastic. It's not sharp metal or anything, and those wires will come right through that hole real nice. And you can see where I put it through the DME box, so they can kind of just go straight down through here, and then they'll end up down inside of the car. So obviously no thick harnesses are going to fit through there unless you kind of, I've seen other people cut this section out, and then it's just kind of a nice big hole that you can run everything through. If you wanted to run the entire harness through and into the glove box like a lot of people do, I'm probably just going to leave everything crammed up into this DME box. Here I am on a side quest.
Quest? I'm already on a quest.
That I didn't want to be on, but I knew it was going to happen anyway. I knew the evaporator was leaking when I got this car. It could smell Freon coming through the vents. And it had really low charge pressure. Some dye on the drain on the underside of the vehicle too. So I really didn't want to do it, but here we are. Got the dash out, crash bar out. We're going to be doing an evaporator and a heater core because we're going in there, so I'm definitely doing both. Not a fun job, don't recommend it. Working on the clutch line today. We have the Fabot clutch line kit. So it comes with this pre-made clutch line that goes from the clutch pedal to the inside of the transmission for the throwout bearing. It has a nice quick connect on the clutch pedal here. See it right in the center. That piece gets clipped in with a new clip. If you're missing that clip like I was, you can buy it separately. I'll put the part number for it in the description of this video. So you can see here I do have the manual pedals installed in the vehicle. Super easy. It was one brake pedal pin and 3 bolts, and that whole brake pedal comes out. Swapped in the manual ones. We have this new clutch line installed through this grommet in the firewall here. Kept the grommet because it's kind of right where the exhaust is. So try to keep as much heat out of here as possible. Just kind of made a slit in it and ran that line through it. Pop the grommet back in, and we're going to connect it up to the master cylinder here on the clutch pedal. And then the other line goes through the firewall right next to the clutch master cylinder right there to go up to the brake fluid reservoir, where we'll connect it to one of the nipples, and then we'll get starting on bleeding. If you feel like spending an extra $50, here's the part number for the OEM rubber boot on a 128 or a 135 for a manual transmission. Seals up nice and tight in the hole there. And here's the part number for the fancy Alcantara boot that BMW sells for a 128 or 135 too. Fits in there nice. Okay, so we're getting kind of close on wiring, finishing wiring. I have most of the engine harness ran kind of where I want to, just down the valve covers there. I did have to run an extra wire from the AC compressor. So that's the activation wire for the AC compressor. I did run that through the harness all the way around with a couple of other things with the alternator harness and the drive-by-wire harness. So I just kind of loomed those all in one over to the passenger side. As we got to the box, it's really full. We already wired the output for the cooling fan. I also ran a wire inside of the car that I have hooked up to an input for a two-step. I also have wired up a input here from the black-white wire that I ran through the boot down and around to the AC pressure switch, or pressure switch down there next to the washer fluid nozzle. That's going to be our AC pressure input for the Holley. So I have that wired as an input to our white-blue wire. And then I just finished up wiring this gray-red wire, which is going to be an output. That's going to trigger this relay, and that's going to send power from the fused smaller stud through the relay out to the compressor. So we have pretty much everything wired up at this point. I have to make a couple more connections inside of the car and loom a couple of more things here, and then finalize the wiring in this area so that it's going to fit nicely with the lid closed. Running the constant power for the Terminator X, the actual ECU plug, the big one, right to the battery terminal post. This one is not fused, it goes directly to the battery, so counts, right? Sure. And then we ended up running our red wire, power wire from the Terminator X harness for the injectors to this post, and this is also a power wire for the relay and AC compressor. Got both grounds hooked up over here on the ground stud. I did end up cutting off these things off of the factory harness there. It actually worked out really nice. I mean, the lid should close up and be sealed just like it was factory because it's got all 4 grommets on the top, and the Terminator X harness fits like really nice through there. So I have it running down, zip tied to the brake line right there, along with all the other harnesses that are kind of coming out. And then it's tucked behind this heat shield right here. I had to buy a new one because as soon as I touched it, it ripped out of the bottom. So got a new heat shield. We got the harness kind of tucked behind there as best as possible. And then it runs down, back towards the firewall. And it's also tucked behind this heat shield that runs along the back of the firewall as well. So we have nice good clearance with the exhaust. There's no wires hanging down near the exhaust right there. That's about as close as it's going to get. It's going to be plenty fine. Starter wire still has pretty good clearance between the headers as well, so we should be in good shape there. Especially once the cowling goes on right here, this is all going to be hidden, and this is going to be running that cowl, so it should look pretty nice when it's all put together. I still have to run the wiring inside of the car. We do have a couple of wires that we ended up running through that grommet there. Input wire for a 2-step. Green wire is going to go to fuel pump. So I'm going to have to run that down here up along the back until I get to the back for the fuel pump there. I'm going to go over fuel pump wiring. There's probably a dozen different ways you could do this. The stock EKPS control module for the fuel pump lives right here, at least on a 1 series and most 3 series. You can leave this plugged in totally intact, don't even have to play with it. It just runs the fuel pump at 100% all the time as soon as the key is turned on. That's how I started the car the first time for just the initial startup. It works just fine. The only thing you're going to run into is anytime you have the key on, making a change to your tune or checking for powers and grounds or doing any other kind of wiring issue on the vehicle. Anytime you'd have the key on, it's just running the fuel pump all the time. These EKPSs are also very common to fail. So I'm going to delete it and just run a relay in its place. These two wires come directly from the fuel pump. So this is fuel pump wiring. It's plugged into a little small black connector on that EKPS. Took the ground wire, grounded it, so the fuel pump is always grounded. The red and white stripe wire is going to get its power from this relay when the relay is activated. The power into the relay for the fuel pump is getting supplied by the red and black wire down here that ran into the white connector. It's a hot at all times fused wire. I'm just using a stock fuel pump, so I don't need some kind of crazy gauge wire. The stock BMW wiring size is going to be just fine for the stock BMW fuel pump. So this is where it's going to get its power from when the relay is switched. The relay itself is also grounded through the brown wire off of that same white connector. You can also ground it right to here too. I had just already crimped this before I thought about grounding this black relay wire as well. So I just went to the brown wire that was already supplied, ohmed it out. It's full-time ground too. And then we have our control wire, which is this white wire. This is the one that's going to activate the relay. It's going to supply 12 volts from the Holley green wire. I switched it over to a red wire and ran it all the way back to here. And this is going to, anytime the key is turned on, the Holley is going to supply 12 volts to this white wire. It's going to click the relay, and then it's going to send power through the relay down to the fuel pump. Should work just fine. And until I have to redo my fuel system, this is probably how I'm going to rock it. Right, so we are like right here. Cooling system, vacuum bled, filled, no air pockets in the system. I got a bunch of idle time on it. I've got a couple of drive cycles on it now, just kind of going around the neighborhood. Everything seems to be in really good shape. BMW cooling system seems to be awesome so far. I put a 160-degree thermostat in it, and the thing won't get above like 180 degrees. And like I have the fan turned on at 185, and it's like barely even turning the fan on. So it seems like it's working really, really well. I'm hopefully in the wintertime, I don't have to change the thermostat out to like 180-degree thermostat so that I can, you know, have some heat inside of the cabin, but we'll mess with that when the time comes. As of right now, it's you're running about 180 degrees pretty much all the time right now, but we've also got like awesome weather out recently, so we'll see how that works out. But right now, got all the covers back on. Like I said, a bunch of idle time, a couple of drive cycles on it. I was having a pretty big issue with the car basically shutting off when I hit 4,000 RPMs, no load or a light load. It would do it while I was driving, or it would do it while I was standing in the driveway and just free revving it. It would hit 4,000 RPMs and basically just shut off. But I was able to correct that issue. I'm going to make a separate video about it. It was a faulty crankshaft sensor. I had to get a different brand. But I'll make another video about what I did to kind of like diagnose that issue and see if it helps anybody else that's having a similar issue. But otherwise, it is pretty much ready to go at this point. I'm just going to kind of focus on cleaning the car up a little bit more. And then I'll get you in the car with some videos of it driving down the road, hopefully some exhaust clips. And so that's a wrap on the car. We've got the engine and transmission in, the Holley wiring done. There's still a couple of small items that I'm going to be doing, finishing up, probably making videos too, on hopefully using Pro Tools to delete all of the lights on the dash so that we can get rid of that and have a fully functioning light-free dash. I'll probably be making a video on the Holley setup too, just for anybody that's kind of new to the Holley system, just kind of setting up base maps, trying to get the car at least running and driving well enough. I do plan on doing the entire tune to this vehicle myself, including like wide open throttle pulls and all of that, so I'll kind of give you an idea of what it looks like going through the Holley software. It's kind of my first time tuning a vehicle from start to finish, so it's kind of exciting too. Closing thoughts on the car. This is probably the most fun I've had building a full vehicle like this, or just like a SPOP in general, because of how easy it was from start to finish. It took about exactly 3 months working on it once, at the most twice a week for a few hours after work, and maybe here and there on a weekend when I could get time to go out into the garage and get some stuff done. What really helped was being able to do like 3 or 4 months of research in advance and kind of stockpiling all of the parts that I was going to need, so that every time I could get to the garage, I could just get right into it and go ham and trying to, blast out as much as I could all at once. And it really helped having all of the parts that I knew were going to be necessary at the garage ready to go. So hopefully a couple of these videos helped at least 1 or 2 of you guys putting one of these together. It was, like I said, really enjoyable that everything fit up, bolted up, all the gauges work, integrates into the chassis really well. The engine and trans feel really, really good in this car. It feels like it's pretty effortlessly pushing the car around so far, and I really haven't gotten into it too much. But like I said, there'll be a couple more videos of the car making some pulls and making some cool noises and stuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the build. Thank you.